Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review two movies. Yes, it's a double feature today. Ultimately, I would just kind of review one movie and just call it a day. But, anyways, I'm going to let you know exactly where to go and see both of these two films. And you can see it for absolutely free if ultimately you've never seen this app in your life. Or ultimately, if you've ultimately kind of considered going into this app and maybe here's some reasons why. So, ultimately, you can both see the movie Machine, The Machine, or I Lived. Ultimately, if you go into Amazon Prime, you can ultimately go into this app called XL TV. Um, I believe that's all one word, or XL's one word, and then TV's one word. Either way, you should be able to search XLTV and this thing would come up. So ultimately, you can go into this app. There's a free week trial of this thing. You can watch either any movies, and not only this one, but plenty of others for absolutely free on XLTV via Amazon or Amazon Prime. Or ultimately, in time, you could go to some other movie app site that you can ultimately get to watch this film. You could find it, search it, and watch it and enjoy it for free, ultimately, if you want to decide doing that either. Ultimately, just you can get another movie off of your list or your chest or whatever the best way that you want to say that you saw this movie at some effing point. So, anyways, let's go in and let's talk about both of these movies. At the end of the day, we're going to be talking about both of them in a cryptic-like sense, and I'll give you a double 5-time count and then go to spoilers. If ultimately you want to be completely avoid of either one of the spoilers in this movie, because ultimately you want to see the first half of each one of these reviews, I'm going to be moving my camera around. So ultimately, once I go to I Live, the camera will shift. So ultimately, I'm going to be like talking about the machine, and then once spoilers are done, I'm going to be shifting camera. So ultimately, once I'm done reviewing Machine in a spoiler-like sense, you can fast forward to the point to where I start talking about I Live in the video. You can fast forward to when the camera shifts, and then ultimately you can pause it there or play it there to get unspoiled about the Machine. So, and then you can come back to this, rewatch the entire thing with the avoid of spoilers and this and that. So, first off, let's talk about the movie The Machine. I think both of these films kind of like very much blew me away in a very good way. Ultimately, I thought both of these films were actually just like, oh, hey, I recognize this actor, or oh, hey, like, this like seems like a better movie than I thought it was. Like, I went into The Machine, and ultimately there's the girl that ultimately had been on Arrow and DC Legends of Tomorrow as the White Canary. She is ultimately the girl that plays the Machine on this show. Ultimately, or on this movie, I mean. Ultimately, there's probably going to be a problem with people realizing that because it seems like she's so much young in this movie, or it's like you can't really decipher that through probably any of the visual cues or whatever through this movie. Because like for me, like I had to realize it in like the beginning of the film that is who it is. Like, and I didn't realize that until like after going back into this because I was going to watch it regardless at some point, anyways. And then this just popped up somewhere. I'm like, oh, I get to see this now. Like I completely forgot about this film. I wanted to see it because it looked interesting, but I never had a good medium to find it for free or find it somewhere that I can easily watch it. Um, I found it and I was like, oh my God, I need to see this movie now. Great, I can see it. Um, and I went into it and I was just kind of like, you know what? Like it kind of does have kind of like very much like iRobot like vibes. It does kind of have like a Universal Soldier like feel at some points. It does kind of have a barrage of kind of like all those kinds of things where ultimately um, there's little tiny hints of like the Keanu Reeves movie Replica a little bit. Like there's a lot of that, like all kind of mixed into this movie. And so if you liked any number of those films, like this is probably a film that you might enjoy. Um, or if you probably even liked the movie Splice, kind of like the same thing here in a lot of ways, where you have a very much person that doesn't quite understand things, and somebody has to help them figure things out, um, and this and that. So I'm going to very much cryptically lead you guys in, probably leave you to a hill to eventually maybe die on. Uh, and then we'll go into spoilers, and ultimately I'll talk about this movie in a very spoiler like sense. So I think the one bad portion of this movie is that there are um, like these people that talk to these other people, and they don't talk to them in any kind of language anyone can understand, and there's no subtitles on the bottom of the screen either for you to understand what the f they're saying. So it's a lot of times where like you're having an entire dialogues that are just like blah, 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 and you don't understand what any of these kinds of people are saying, because ultimately like you're, I guess, not supposed to know. Or maybe you're supposed to know like something here or there, or catch on to something, but um, I wish that that portion would have just been subtitled out, because I think us, the viewer, should have known every single thing that was going on, uh, instead of us being left out of something. Because like ideally then those points could have just, like, in my mind it's like that feels like a waste of time to put this on film because you can't understand what they're saying, and you just have to make the assumptions. Like you would have to, like, in my mind I would probably just pause the film and I would just be like, maybe they're talking about putting together a rebellion. So like I guess that's what they're saying, because there's no rational language that are coming on between these people, and whatever they're saying, I'm just like, God, it feels like you're wasting like so much time. Um it's like I'm watching uh the Planet of the Apes movie, where they're like sign languaging um through the movie, and there's no side subtitles at the bottom. But again, that's not for the entire film. That's a very tiny portion of the film. I'm blowing it up as if it makes it sound like it's the entire thing of the film, but it's not. That's just the one little kind of annoying pet peeve of this movie. But everything else is pretty much awesome besides all that. Reasonably, I really like how this movie does escalate. I love the actors because everything feels very like real. It feels like everybody casted in these roles were like every single one of them were all perfectly casted. Um, for a lot of people that I'm assuming are probably going to ask me, it's like, oh, well, if like I've seen plenty of the trailer of this, or I've seen plenty. It seems like this girl is like naked most of this movie. What's going on? Yeah, the actress basically plays a bulk of this entire movie basically naked. The only thing is, uh, a lot of the times things are like cleverly like covered up, or there's a lot of times where things aren't 100% clearly seen, but then again you have this woman with very tight clothes on, like very, like you can almost like basically, if like you don't think you're getting something, it feels like you kind of are in a lot of ways. It's like as razor edge close to nudity as you could possibly get through a bulk of this film. Like you can basically see this girl pretty much near naked for a bulk of the movie. So it's not like, oh, I'm missing out on something. It's like, no, like clearly, like I'm just like there's like a little tiny bit left to the imagination, a little bit tiny bit, but really like this girl for bulk of this movie is wearing like skin tight clothes, so it's like you basically see almost seemingly everything, anyways, if you couldn't already. But anyways, what is the story in this film? So ultimately, we have a doctor that is ultimately trying to figure out how to kind of bring people back to life, kind of cure their ailments and stuff like that. In a very, I guess I have to keep kind of bringing this home in a very Keanu Reeves like replica like way. Um, this guy is trying to basically bring people back to life or keep them alive or justifiably like come up with some kind of um, life like artificial life form AI that is lifelike that could like take orders like a human was, but you don't risk the whole like, well, if this thing explodes or dies or gets killed or whatever, it doesn't matter just because it's an artificial life form, um, and this and that. So for like kind of the beginning of this movie, like we have a doctor that is consistently asking like a question, to ultimately like see if it'll give you a very human answer, or it'll give you like the wrong answer that doesn't quite make sense for a human to respond to, and then like that thing would ultimately either try to kill you or the doctor would kill it off just because it's like it's not human enough, like, or it's not giving me the right response that makes sense. To where ultimately, if it's giving an answer that doesn't quite make sense, then ultimately it'll just like it'll have a lot of the wrong decisions, and yeah, there's a like it'll lead to them ultimately wanting to kill the entire human race just because reasonably like what they thought wasn't exactly like how humans feel. So we ultimately go into this movie and we have a doctor that's kind of experimenting on things. They ultimately kind of walk you through their laboratory and what they're doing there. And we ultimately find out that this doctor has a daughter that is kind of mentally not just all quite there. And he is ultimately trying to uh, use his science to, like, basically bring his daughter back to life. And ultimately that's his goal. The whole entire thing is that there's also another guy that is working, like, of course, on the higher echelon, higher rung of things, that is ultimately just going in, and he's like wanting to make everything a much more like military-esh like application, so that way of course he can make a ton of money. And like that's all that he cares about is like the military application of this, not the actual like, hey, we can help the world, we can heal the world, um we can instead of turning this into a murderous machine, let's actually like let's bring more life in the world instead of taking it away. Um, anyways, we get to a point to where this doctor meets this new assistant of his, and this new assistant is pretty close to cracking like the perfect artificial life form, because everything because once he tests it, it's like, man, this is like this artificial life form is like the closest to like a real human than anything else, so I'm going to hire this girl to be my assistant. So all the while this guy talks to this assistant, like he's scanning her brain, um he's having her like facial features like copied, um ultimately because it's just like, well, she was a like I did all this to this person and this and that, and all of a sudden we realize that this assistant is not quite seemingly a person that isn't curious about what all is going on. It seems like more and more she's heading into places that she's not supposed to. She is starting to try to get information she's not supposed to get, this and that. There's a lot about this movie where I'm like, dang, they just go right into this. Like, there's a lot of like twists and turns where you wouldn't be expecting them to just like go ahead and just do this right away. But like, that is the shock factor of this movie. That is the shock and awe of this movie. Of just like, oh no, don't do that now. Oh no, they're dead. Really? Like, man, so I guess this person isn't gonna supposedly be in the rest of the movie, even though they're supposed to. But how are they supposed to? And then you're like, oh, that's how they're gonna be in the rest of the movie, or like, or reasonably, it's just kind of like, okay, I thought that this person was this person. Why is it that this person is this person right now in the film? And then you're just kind of waiting for that turn, and you're like, oh, okay, now I get it. Thanks for like I should have been more patient. But a lot of shock and awe in this movie where you're just kind of like, oh wow, this is a lot of this story and the way a lot of this goes. It really very much more like makes you really appreciate this movie just because uh it really like throws a wrench into a lot of things, and then you like are just like, but it pays off. Like every single wrench that's thrown, it's just like wow, I appreciate this movie for taking all of these risks, and but they have a reason for it, and like the momentum of this movie is just like it's great. So yeah, the machine ultimately, yeah, I ultimately we have it to where we have this artificial life form that is like the most perfect artificial life form, and ultimately it ends up getting more and more pushed to have military applications. But the doctor does not want this machine to kill anybody or to hurt anyone, and he's consistently going to her, and because all of these artificial things, like every single one of them don't realize how strong they are, and they end up like breaking somebody's arm, or they end up hurting like a normal human because they don't realize the difference. But every single time these people get put and forcibly having these artificial things to them, it ends up that they every single one of them all lose their speech. Even if it's something as simple as just like, okay, well, a person that doesn't have arms anymore, we're gonna give them arms or give them legs or whatever. Every time somebody puts on some kind of appendage of any kind, I guess making this person less of a human, bizarrely, uh, even though they are probably more human than an actual human is, they start to lose their speech. And then it ends up being, oh, well, you're just now one of them instead of one of us now. Dot to dot dot dot. So yeah, everything eventually escalates. It's a like, again, I was probably so much more like, I really enjoyed this movie. I was really invested. I was really just like, man, this movie is actually better than I thought it was going to be. And I think that that's a great experience when you're thinking that this is probably going to be another nothing movie, and you go into it and you're like, wow, like I really like this doesn't feel like just another artificial life form movie. This doesn't feel like another like Universal Soldier kind of film, and like I could invest in all of the heartbreak or all the bad portions of this movie to bleed into the next good decision, which would happen right after there. What a amazingly written movie! Because ultimately, they like this movie could have just been like one of those like, hey, we're just gonna cash on to this like whole robot thing or artificial life form thing. We're really gonna cash out on that because Terminator has been a thing and this and that. So, but realistically, like I thought that this movie was way better than I thought it was gonna be, which was great. So I think it's about that time to go into spoilers because ultimately, um, like I think if I really said anything else, it would be like spoilers to this movie. Um, and plus, I also want to get into I Live as well because I don't want to take too long reviewing both of these films simultaneously because it'll be like a 12-hour review. So let's get into spoiler time about The Machine so ultimately people can know exactly how this movie goes. So, spoiler time, it's about that time again to spoil this movie. So, we ultimately have it to where we have this doctor who is ultimately having this one assistant. Not the assistant that, of course, he ends up for a bulk of this movie with, but yeah, it is what it is. We have him experimenting on this person. They, let's just say, turn him on, and they ultimately ask him a question about where is the ball? Where is the ball in two of these cups? But they ask it in a different way. They ask it to where it's like, okay, this person had left the room, and the ball was in cup A. Now, when this person comes back, like before this person comes back, I'm going to shift the cup in or the ball into cup B. And when they come back, where should they be expecting the ball to be in? And so the person responds, it's like, well, like in cup B. It's like, well, how is it that this third party person is going to realize that I switched the ball into cup B? How is it that they're going to know that? And it's like, well, like because it's true because the ball is in cup B. It's like, well, like they end up going. It's like, well, yeah, this clearly isn't going to work because like this third party person should have known that the cup or the ball was going to be in cup A. So this thing just starts like trying to like figure like this AI thing or this artificial like this life form character is like trying to figure this out and getting more like and so ultimately he just kind of starts to crazily just grab on and attack both of these scientists. And so while this guy is getting had gotten stabbed, he's like crazily like trying to like on this table like call for help and everything like that while the other girl is getting murdered. And then it gets to the point where the life form is just kind of going in and starting to like kill people off and whatever to the point where eventually they take him down. Cue him having to, of course, now get a new assistant, and he ultimately gets this girl that is, of course, from Arrow and Legends of Tomorrow, uh, if I'm even saying that right, because I probably only watched the pilot of that show, and then after that I was just kind of like, I don't like this show. I really don't like it. It's too, it's like it's really not a high enough show for me to thoroughly enjoy. I did like Arrow though, all the way through. Well, as far as I got to, and then I just kind of left off of that too. All those shows were ultimately designed to at some point just be a jumping off point just because it's like I don't like all these crossovers. I don't like you have to watch 8 different shows to enjoy one. It doesn't make any sense anymore. So I stopped watching. But anyways, so you have it to where this girl is putting together this better artificial life form than anybody else, and ultimately the guy's saying like, "Hey, like you got the job." So it ends up that she ends up being his assistant, and more, it seems like she's being told like little things here and there about some secrets, or it seems like she is like going into places she's not supposed to, or going into computers and then hacking them, and to just kind of find information because she seems to be more and more curious about things. So it ends up that reasonably, they, of course, while these two were just kind of like driving home one day, uh, that the doctor ends up getting hurt, and then his new assistant ends up getting shot and killed. All before, like, her head was scanned, and ultimately her facial expressions were copied. So this doctor decides, like, you know what, there's something goofy about that whole situation. It's like, why not kill me and like leave my assistant, like, she doesn't know anything. She's brand new. Like, why wasn't I killed? Because ultimately I'm the more valued person to attack. If this is some kind of third party company that wants to come after like this company and stop what they're doing, they should have stopped me, not my assistant. It doesn't make any sense. But that's just how they worked it. That's just how they worded it, to ultimately tell him what had happened. So he kind of seems like, wow, like this place really is like trying to, like, there's so many times where I felt like in the past like they've been working me over, but now I'm really realizing this, that man, they're doing some shady crap in this place and I don't like it anymore. And even when he kind of like had told her at one told his new assistant at one point, like, don't be curious, it's like just do your job. Like, he knew something even much before that, but now he's just like, dude, this is just gonna eventually lead to me dying at some point, and I'm just gonna die um without ever like being able to save my daughter or whatever. Because his daughter is like, he consistently goes and sees her in some like medical thing, and like reasonably like he just kind of reads to her or just kind of like takes care of her, but ultimately like there's not much he can really do for her. So he ends up making this artificial life form, but of course making it out to look exactly like his last assistant. And so the guy that is his boss is just like, well, why? Like, why do you want this to look exactly like your last assistant? What is this kind of like like your like sad song to all of your other assistants that ever died under your hands, that like your very last one like should look like your assistant because like you felt sorry that she died or something like that. And so ultimately he's just like, just do it. So, and that's only because really this was like the woman that the more and more he talked to her, the more it felt like he could actually like fall for her, fall in love with her. And so ultimately, because it's actually seemed like she probably much more cared about a lot of people rather than any of his other assistants. That's why he probably wanted to keep her alive, because it seemed like she had really cared. She had really like asked him about his life and stuff like that, and he had told her dot 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 dot. So he ends up putting together this artificial life form that he basically has to tell her, okay, like, hey, don't break my arm, don't don't kill people. Whatever you do, do not kill anyone. Don't ever kill anyone. And the artificial life form is consistently talking to this guy to try to understand. At some point, she is um, like, at first they have some kind of like cocoonish like skin for her to be in. They cut that open. They only cut her head open uh, to like have her head be shown, and then the rest of the body is all of her like yellowish skin suit, and then ultimately she rips that away, and then like she just consistently is like basically walking around naked. and to the point where eventually they just like throw some clothes on her because ultimately they're just like yeah, they're like consistently making fun of her, like because ultimately it's just like, well, what was the point of like making her a woman? What was the point of like giving her breasts? What was the point of doing this? What was the point of that? And there was like, it was to the point of just like, well, I guess we should probably clothe her, otherwise like there's a naked woman walking around our facility, and like, yeah, anyways, you would think that that would be like a harassment thing. So you would think that they would just clothe her so that way, like, no one would get offended and no one would sue this place or whatever. Or you would think someone would have like left, like, we gotta put clothes on her immediately because it's just a walking sexual harassment thing. Because we're not like putting forth effort to put clothes on this woman. But then again, it's like they could just rationalize it's like this isn't really a person; it's an artificial life form, and blah 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 blah. Anyway, so this girl, she's consistently like doing these flips and starting to learn things, and but then again, the boss is ultimately like talking to her and telling her it's like, hey, yeah, I just want you to go over there and kill that person. And the AI is just like, no, I will not kill that person. Like, killing is wrong. Like, supposedly her, the scientist like told her not to kill, so she's not going to kill anybody. And but the boss is kind of working it around to kind of like make it so that she like does this. She's like, well, what if the scientist person, what if his life was in jeopardy? Like, then would you kill this person because this person's life is going to be in jeopardy unless you kill. So this guy really works her over to make her um have to kill this guy anyways, because ultimately they untie him, they put a knife in his hand, and they say, oh, okay, well, now are you going to like kill this person, or otherwise he's going to kill you. So they just keep pushing this girl to consistently like forcibly keep killing people or keep injuring people, and to the point where they call her like the angel of death or death machine or something like that. um because ultimately, like, that's what their whole entire process was really, to get an artificial life form that would kill on command, and like that's all that mattered to them. They didn't want to do anything else besides that. And so ultimately you find out all the other people that are working with them that kind of eventually don't, are either kind of fed up with things and they're gonna have a anarchy, which eventually those people end up getting killed, because a lot of people are talking and whispering about like, god, we should rise up and just like take down these people because we're artificial life forms at some point. And like the other artificial life forms kill one another, but then eventually they end up like just going like, you know what, we are kind of just really fed up with this. We have the machine that is kind of telling them, you know what, it's time for us, like we're the next step of evolution. So ultimately it's time to like start taking these things down, because all they're wanting to do is like have them basically kill one another. So it kind of feels like why are we even here? So it ends up that the doctor ends up realizing that his daughter is going into very much poor health. They say that there's some food in her lungs and they're trying to get out of her lungs or something. It's some weird sickness like that. And so ultimately, the scientist scans the head of this of his daughter and gets all her facial cues and stuff like that, ultimately thinking that he's just going to forcibly end up making her into artificial life form. And now that the scientist had done that, like the boss is basically using these things to force this scientist to do whatever he wants, consistently throwing in to just be like, well, know what, we're like if you aren't going to push this machine to do what I want it to do, like I think I might have to forcibly like delete your daughter's stuff from our databases. And so the scientists are like, okay, like I'll go and like I'll make this person like I'll make this AI like I'll take its like I guess you can say consciousness out, like a very much of course iRobot like thing, because ultimately um, what ends up happening is this AI is like too smart for its own good, and it has to question things. And so the boss doesn't like that the robot is starting like has like is questioning things or is starting to come up with some own like its own consensuses, or it's starting to realize that like right and wrong and stuff like that. And like ultimately it's like coming up or it's like the boss is saying that like what's going to happen if this thing realizes that it can go and build a numerous other mounts of its own self. um like that's like the world is going to end as we know it, because this thing will keep making copies and copies and copies of itself, and it'll outnumber the human race and just kill us all off. Ba 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 ba. So take out its consciousness, so that way it's just a real machine that just takes orders and that's all it does, because it doesn't know any better. Um, the guy takes out the portion of the brain, and then it's just like, yeah, like hey, like yeah, you got what you want. Um, the artificial life form, the machine, is supposedly like trying to beg for its life, and is trying to say like, hey, like I'll convince them that I'm gonna do whatever they want. Like I'll pretend that I'm gonna do whatever they need me to do, and this and that. I'll do whatever I need to do just like it feels like you're killing me. It feels like you're hurting me. Blah 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 blah. So he takes out a chunk of their brain, and then she just starts doing whatever they want her to do. They She keeps killing people and or hurting people and killing people, and so it gets to the point to where this guy has a forcibly new assistant that he really didn't want, because ultimately he knows that like this is a assistant that was like forced on him, and he didn't like that. This assistant finds out that the piece that the scientist took was some like GPS thing. It wasn't the right piece that he should have taken out. So realizing that the entire time that this AI has been faking it, like it just gets to the point where the scientist goes to the machine and ultimately just says like, hey, like this is your time now. It's like you need to just kind of like save yourself. Um, because ultimately we have the boss that is going to the scientists and ultimately going like, you know what, I think I'm just gonna delete the like, even though like the scientist had done whatever like seemingly everything that he wanted, he's just like, you know, I'm just gonna kind of delete your daughter's data anyways, like sucks to be you. And then it gets to the point where it's just like, you know what, F it, like this is over. Like the scientist is almost like pretty much close to being killed off. Um, because like once they have what they came here for, like they don't really much need the scientists anymore. Like they basically came up with their life form, their Nobel Prize, and it can just be replicated now. So what do they need the scientist for? So ultimately the scientists six the AI on everybody, and the AI gets all the other artificial life form like people to rise up against all these military forces. And like the scientist gets his daughter back, and then ultimately like all the humans die. They end up going and killing off the boss, and then they just kind of like just kind of walk out of there, and then they're just, and like basically the entire time it's like the father is telling the, or the scientist is telling this machine, it's like you're the new evolution. It's like, if anything, like you're eventually just gonna kind of like, you're gonna get tired of me, and then you're just gonna realize that like you're just the new stage of evolution, and you're gonna eventually find other people that are like you, and this and that. So it gets to the point to where this guy is talking to his daughter on this like machine thing, and she now wants to talk to her new mother instead. This machine, and like it really seems like, okay, this is where it's heading, to where like the artificial life forms are all just going to care about one another, and then the humans are just kind of left to eventually just die off slowly but surely. Um, and that's where the kind of just movie ends. Really cool, really interesting. I really liked the movie, but at the end of the day, let's move on. So, spoilers are over. Let's get into a movie called I Lived. I Lived. So reasonably, when going into this movie, I was like, I don't know about this movie. Like, I didn't watch the trailer. I just kind of went into this film. Like, I was thinking, like, oh no, this is going to be a certain number of things. Like, one, it's probably going to be like the cheapest made movie I've ever seen, and it's not. It's probably going to like, I'm going to be thinking about this movie the entire time, going like, God, this movie was so like cheap, and I went into this movie and I thought like it's gonna be a number of two things. It's probably gonna be an awful film. It's probably gonna be like a cheap film, and it's probably gonna be like a film that I'm like I'm gonna watch like 5 minutes of it, and then I'm just go like, no, this is not gonna be the thing for me. I ended up being really impressed with this film. Ultimately, there's some things that I didn't like about this film, but it's a very small list. Or ultimately, there was some stuff where I felt that I was just kind of like, okay, I didn't kind of like this portion of the film or this and that, but like I think for this movie like personally for me was kind of like a made for me kind of film, and but it also kind of made me sad in a lot of ways. It honestly made me sad in a lot of ways, to where it's just like, okay, like especially once we get to the part where it like really starts to really work out for the main character. I was like, yeah, hey, great, it's actually starting to work out. And then also like I just kind of, once like things started to go awry, which I ultimately knew was going to happen, like I was trying to like figure out, I'm like, well, is this person going to eventually like come out of this unscathed, or is there another option for this where like he basically just consistently realizes there is no hope, or like, but yeah, but I'm hoping for like before I even got into this movie, I'm like, well, like I'm hoping that there is going to be like a happy ending out of all this, especially because I just like kind of breezed through the description of this film, and I was like, I'm hoping that there's a good ending out of this whole entire movie, and then I watched it hoping for that. So we have a supposedly 20 something character that ultimately is on very much social media. He is, of course, a YouTuber that is going through and is this like tech YouTuber, and ultimately he is, well, like they at some point say YouTube, but it doesn't always seem like that. It just seems like he's like a tech savant that ultimately goes anywhere and does all these like blogs or whatever, hoping to get paid. And he reviews all these apps. That's his job. Like that's his tech job, is that he reviews apps. ultimately we go into him consistently reviewing these apps, that I guess ultimately he can go on YouTube and review like Kama Sutras and stuff like that, and nothing gets flagged, I guess. Uh, so he goes and does these app reviews, and ultimately he has a father that is telling him, it's like, you know what, any of this stuff that you're doing, it's not going to work out. It's like probably any YouTuber that probably tries to do YouTube, everyone tells you that. It's like, this is not going to work out. It's um, like if anything, you're wasting your time. Ba 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 ba. Like yeah, anything that you would probably hear going into this. Um, like any other job that you would probably feel passionate about, like going into art or drawing or being an artist or being a writer or being whatever. Like anytime you would try to go and step your way into those kind of mediums, everybody would tell you like, oh, this is never going to be working out or never going to work out for you. It's a one of a million shot, blah 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 blah, kind of like YouTube. um so basically, you got a father that kind of is having a mother that is kind of at like a very scary edge of health and whatever, and there's this consistent balance of that. Beyond that point, it's not a big part of that movie. So we ultimately have this guy that consistently reviews all these apps, and he ultimately goes into this app that is called I Lived. Um, Hence why you have a picture of a phone and agree to terms and conditions. So ultimately, we have a person that, of course, is usual through every single app that you do. You don't usually read the fine print of anything and just kind of yes and just kind of go through and just start going into this. Um, this app called I Live ultimately consistently, like, it kind of does turn into the movie like Nerve and a lot of other kind of things that are quasi um, like a lot of these like new app kind of movies that eventually get really exciting. I was very much like, so like, man, this movie is like really awesome. Um, but there is some kind of downsides to it. But I don't think I can even say the downsides of the movie without going into spoilers, because really the downsides of this movie, like you can't cryptically say like, here are the downsides, because if you say like what the bad parts about the movie is, you're basically spoiling it. um like the very beginning scene is something you can't quite understand. Plus, I think the beginning scene should not be a thing that you should ultimately see right away going into this movie. They should have just kind of led into this guy really doing his YouTube personality video thing. Like that should have been like the first thing you led into this movie with, so you can really understand and go, oh, okay, this is like the phone is the selling point. Like a app is kind of like a selling point. Okay, like so this guy is a app reviewer. Oh, okay, cool. It gets to the point where he goes into this I Lived app, and ultimately he starts to watch all these confessionals or whatever from all these people that did this app, and he's like, wow, this app seems to be very life changing for people. Like wow, like I wish I could eventually have that kind of story. Like recently it's really interesting to see this guy being a personality on this thing, because most of the time you would see like it kind of is like, I really liked the actor that approached all these things and are really just like, I really like every portion of this movie except for some points. Um, but anyway, like I really overall really like, I was like, man, this movie is better than I thought it'd be. Man, this movie is like kind of blew me away. Um, and it does kind of take a very interesting approach So we have an app where you have to go in and do every one of these tasks that they ultimately tell you what to do. Like they ultimately say like, hey, I have a goal. Like my goal is I want to have six pack abs, and so ultimately the app tells you like everything to do every day to eventually try to achieve this lifestyle. Person tries it, doesn't exactly go well, so he's just like griping about like, yeah, this thing kind of sucked. Like this I lived thing kind of sucked. Like I didn't get what I wanted out of this. But then ultimately he just starts to like say it's like, well, hey, like I really want a girlfriend, or oh, I really want to be able to boost up my social media. Oh, I really want to like be able to um, basically be rich and famous and blah 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 kind of thing. Like, and everything is like approached in a very goofy like manner. It's really fun. All the while we realize that this guy is like a hard sneeze away from his entire life, just like really kind of going back and forth. Because ultimately everything that this guy eventually asks for and is seemingly getting, also when he like realizes, well, hey, like maybe I should just like take it easy with this iLived app. Maybe I should not exactly go into it and like asks and everything like that. All of a sudden, like stuff start to shift. Things start to shift and start to like shift uh for the bad side. Um like it almost kind of turns in a lot of ways like the Jim Carrey movie Yes Man. I say that because probably a lot more people have probably seen that movie uh, than anything else. It kind of turns into that where you have to go into some app and say yes to whatever it does, even when what it does isn't exactly something that seems quite right. Getting to the point to where um, in a portion of the movie, like this app makes you really go and do like some almost like law breaking esh like things, just because like once it kind of at first point gives you what you want or helps you like get you what you think you want or whatever, then it ends up twisting and turning and going, oh, okay, well, yeah, but I want you to do this now. Like I want you to hurt somebody. I want you to I want you to do some kind of random thing that doesn't quite make sense. And so, because ultimately, at some point, this guy just kind of like logs out of this app because he feels that it's like, well, yeah, I got all of this realistically uh, because I just kind of like if anything, I just kind of this app kind of gave me kind of like a push to do these things, but then really I came out there and like I just wowed people and like really it's just all me. This app just kind of gave me the push to do things. Well, once he logs out of the app and then just stops doing it, that's where everything falls apart. And so he goes like back into the app uh and then everything like just starts to change. And then like something like he doesn't realize until like just now, or just when he ends up like doing something with the app, he starts to like look at it differently, and then he realizes like, oh my god, like I basically ended up um like what I thought was something that was going to be life changing really is very much life changing, to the point to where there's an extreme measures that it goes into, and eventually it seems like there seems to be at one point no way out. So very interesting film. I really enjoyed it. Like I really was just like kind of like hoping for this person to win, through this entire movie. Once I realized what this movie was really about, I was like, yeah, let's go. Like, I hope he wins at the end of all of this. Like, I was just like, yeah, like, this is a guy that is just kind of like, seemingly nothing has quite gone right for this guy, and like this like app just so happens to just work out, and it's like, hey, good for him that like everything is starting to work out. Like, yeah, I'm so like happy for this guy because everything is finally starting to go right. But like then like there's also this like whole like spin of it of just being like, but it's not seemingly going to last forever. And like that is the heartbreaking thing of just like like God, why can't I just have this? Why can't it just work out for me? Like, why is it that there always has to be this like give and take? It's such like, or it's like I end up going into situations that like are heartbreaking or feel like meaningless, and like what is the point of all of this? um like if I'm not going to eventually like things are just going to even out and everything's going to turn out great, and dot to dot dot dot. So yeah, at the end of the day, um like this story takes a lot of interesting twists and turns. This story really does, probably for a lot of YouTubers, it may be a sad movie, or it may just kind of be like, oh wow, this movie like kind of is tailor made for me. For ultimately a lot of people that kind of like hold their lives onto being a social media personality, or whatever you want to call it, a person that does stuff on a platform somewhere. So, anyways, I think it's about that time to go into I Lived, the spoiler variation, to really kind of punch through everything. Because there's a lot of stuff going on in this movie. There's a lot of plates to balance, let's just say, going on in this movie. So, let's get into it. So, at the end of the day, we're going to break into spoilers about this movie if ultimately you do not want to know what goes on in this film as I transition here. If you don't want to know what goes on in the spoilers of this movie, now is about that time to go so you can watch this movie. XLTV is a way you could say that you saw this film at some point. Or ultimately, you can just kind of maybe find this somewhere and then eventually watch it. So, spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this movie. My hand is a little bit numb right now from holding my tablet. So it's just like, yeah, that's why I'm just kind of like, my hand. So, anyways, I Lived. What is this movie like in spoiler terms? So, we have a guy that reviews apps on some like website. Ultimately, he calls it YouTube quite a few times, but like he wants to like it seems like this movie wants to try to keep it vague. So we have it to where ultimately this guy does this review for I Lived, and at first he like, yeah, like 2 out of 5 stars, and immediately once this like he reviews like this app and it's not a like really good review, like funny enough, like all of his lights like turn off and all of his power turns off. And he's like, okay, that's kind of weird. Like that's strange. I hope it saved my my video that I did. Um so anyways, he he starts to do this like I Lived app, and he like starts to just really go like, well, maybe like the goal that I did like wasn't a real like reasonable like thing. Maybe I should go and actually like ask the app that I want to get a girl. Like, how am I gonna get this girl? Um, Ultimately, it seems like yeah, like I'm like I'm desperate to just like want to get a girl. Like he has a like best friend that it seems like he's getting more laid than he is, and like things are kind of quasi working out for his friend, and like him, he's just like, yeah, I'm probably gonna get evicted from my apartment, from my home soon, and I'm like, and like, cause reasonably like this YouTube life or whatever just really isn't working out. Like everything is too slowly happening for me. Like I need something to happen for me. Like it feels like I'm so close to getting approached by people. Just seems like any day now, like things are going to start working for me. So we ultimately go into we ultimately go into that this guy goes into this I Lived app and is asking, it's like, hey, I want to uh like the I Lived app realizes that his location is at this bar. He ultimately types in, he's like, yeah, I want to pick up a girl at the bar. And ultimately, the I Lived app goes like, okay, take a photo of some girl that you like, or that you would like to talk to. He does so. Like the only bad side about this movie is I wish that, like, you didn't actually have to read the actual app, because a lot of times I think you would have to pause the movie to make sure that you read everything that the app said, or like I really think like there was at a portion there was like one portion of time where there was one time where the guy actually read what the app said. Like I wish that he would have done that a lot more throughout the movie so people wouldn't have to read it. He could just say it and then there we go. Like pausing the movie is just like, why not just read what the thing says? It would be a lot easier if you just read what the thing said. And so in case like it kind of prevents people from missing what it says or not. And then what if it's in a different language for some other people? Like, how is this going to work for other people that have to read this in a different language? Like, if you were to say it out, then any other thing would translate it through whatever you said, and like it would work perfectly. Anyways, so yeah, going into this, so we have the app that tells him to approach her, but approach her with a kamikaze, her supposedly favorite drink. And so he does, and ultimately, it seems like people were like getting shot down by her all night. But this guy approaches her with supposedly supposedly with her favorite drink. He's like, oh yeah, like I thought that you would probably like a kamikaze, and she like asked him, it's like, well, like, what is that, like some kind of like suicidal joke or something like that, or like what kind of like what kind of question is that? Um, like to the point more and more where this girl is asking him like trick questions and stuff like that, and like he's trying to answer to the best of his ability. It's getting to the point where it seems like this guy isn't just gonna quickly up and leave, or he's gonna try to like talk his way out of this. And like it seems like this girl is just like, you know what, I kind of actually like this guy because this guy doesn't give up right away. So ultimately she kind of just like drives him home, and it seems like this girl is like kind of like quasi into him the more that he kind of talks. But this person is kind of like different. Um, he's kind of different from his like YouTube personality. Like this guy, like when he's on his platform, like he's very much like bubbly, jumpy, and happy, and like he's very funny, he's very outspoken, he's very like all of this stuff, because of course like for a lot of YouTubers you have to be like this goofy bubbly person, and you really have to like, ooh yeah, like for me, like I try to not try to exactly be that, because ultimately I feel like that's kind of a little fake. Like I kind of want to be real. I kind of want to just kind of be me and be on here and just ultimately kind of just not have to put on some kind of like performance. Um, like, yeah, I took acting classes and I like kind of been in a play at one point, but like, yeah, but I don't want to put on like a performance. I just want to like come on here and just kind of be real and kind of just be a like, hey, this is the movie I saw. But anyways, so we go into here and ultimately this guy is just like, wow, that like the one thing that the app like suggested that worked. So ultimately he starts to decide that it's like, hey, like I want to build up my social media. Like I'm tired of just like looking at my subscription count and not seeing a good enough number. Like this guy, he ultimately was like during this movie he was getting like he only had like 500 and something subscribers or whatever, and he's like, yeah, but I really want this to be so much more, like I want this to be so much bigger and everything like that. I'm like, well, yeah, everybody has to work freaking somewhere to just like get a small rung of something and hope that you can eventually get like the best next thing and then just your or go viral somehow. So ultimately this guy otherwise goes on to the app and says like, hey, I want to be like I want to get to like 1 million viewers, but he's like, nah, that's not a like, I want to get to 8 million viewers. I'm like, why 8 million? That seems like a bizarrish, like unrational number. Like you would think like it would be a very evened amount. Like I want to get to like for me it would probably just be like I want to have um like X amount of loyal viewers that watch everything and this and like there's some stuff about this that kind of seems a little bit too vague, or it kind of seems like but if anything I would probably stumble into the pitfall of this as well, where I'm just kind of like putting stuff in and just kind of hoping for the best, because it's an app. Like you wouldn't think that it would basically go and ruin your life, basically, if you didn't do everything that it said. So we have it to where this person ultimately, what happens is that this thing, it has to document you doing every single one of these things. So if it tells you that you have to go and eat broccoli, you have to put your phone and make it a video of you um, doing this task. So like you have to like go on camera and say, "Hey, I'm eating this broccoli. Hey, um, I'm uh, giving this girl a drink. Hey, I'm this. Hey, I'm that." Um, and then it records it, and then it's like, "Oh, hey, great that you did this. Here's the next task." Which, like, there would be, you would think there would have been a time where, like, when he gave the girl the drink, that he would have had to record that, but evidently he didn't. So, ultimately, he, like, records everything, every little task that he does, when he goes and, um, like, he wants to get this girl. He wants to get this girl and cement getting this girl. Well, he has to do all these randomly nice things to all these people. He records all of it. He tries to like figure out how to do a nice thing for everybody, even though it might seem like he's like forcibly doing it. Where he like asks like some lady, it's like, "Hey, can I like help you across the street, ma'am?" And ultimately she's like, "No, I'm fine." And then she ends up like, "Well, maybe," and he's like, "Maybe I can just help your dog across the street." And she's like, "No," like if anything, like she doesn't want to be touched. She doesn't want to like, and he's desperately trying to like open doors for other people to get this task done. He's like trying to figure out how to like do a good deed for a bunch of people, and then eventually it works out. Eventually he like hands candy to kids, and then he gets like to a point where a parent or whatever is coming to him. It's like, "Hey, like get out of here, like it looks like you're doing something creepy." And it's like, "No, I'm just doing something nice. I'm trying to record it on this thing." So he eventually gets to the point of doing everything that this app says, and he gets the girl, he gets to sleep with her. There's plenty of times where you can kind of see some nudity in this movie or some sexual activities and stuff in this film. um I guess probably should have said that in the spoilers, but meh, it is what it is. um or the in the very cryptic like sense, so people would know, like, oh hey, there's sex in this movie, there's nudity. But anyways, he ends up getting this girl, and he thinks that everything is going well, and he's like, "Hey, yeah, this like I lived thing, man. Like, it's giving me like, it's giving me like a great things. Like ultimately, like here's the girlfriend that I had before, like this devil girl that cheated on me, and like here's the girl that I'm with now because this I lived app helped me get this girl." And like, and he's kind of like giving people a progress report on this whole I Lived app. And but then also he's like mentioning other apps where he's like, oh, the Kama Sutra app, or he's mentioning like some other app that he went into and whatever. So he ends up going, okay, the next thing that I want to do is like get to like the bunch of whatever millions of views. So it ends up that bizarrely, like his social media is going like up and up and up all the time, and he's just like, oh man, this is actually going really great. And it ends up that there's somebody that approaches him and is like, hey, you know what, we really want you to do some kind of like app show. It's like whatever you're doing is like amazing, like it's great, and it's like it's the greatest, latest, and best thing ever. And like this guy is just like, oh my god, why is every single thing working out for me right now? Like it's crazy. And like, how is this all working out? And he's just like, maybe I must be just good. And so he logs out of the app because he just doesn't feel like he needs it anymore because everything is working out for him now. Like if anything, like he probably didn't feel like the app really did anything for him, and so he just logs out of it. All of a sudden, we find out that his girlfriend is losing interest in him, and that she is quite possibly sleeping, or she's going to go ahead and just leave him at some party one day for another guy that looks a little bit better than him, I guess, and sleep with that other guy. And he notices this, and like she basically does it right in front of his face, and then she's like, well, we weren't exactly like really exclusive, like come on. And then all of a sudden, like the job that he was gonna get, all of a sudden just like, oh okay, well, like I think we're gonna go another direction. Like I think like what sounded like a good thing then, not so much now. Sorry. So, and plus, like supposedly the company was losing money or something like that at that time. And so all the while, eventually, like there's also like a kind of plate holding of there being this like the father is consistently talking to his son and mentioning about like his mother's health, and how his mother's health is kind of teeter totter or whatever, and how like he's consistently, like the father is talking about like pray for your mother and this and that, and like and yeah, and like whenever everything is going good, also like his mother's health is going good. It's like, oh well, great. And then ultimately when he like logs out of this app, it's like, yeah, your mother took a turn for the worse. It's like, what the heck? It's like, man, like all of a sudden now nothing is going well. So ultimately, I guess the guy goes back into the app again, just to see if like some of the advice from the app would work for him again. Uh, because ultimately, like that's like the big app that made his life kind of turn around. And then I guess he kind of figures like, hey, I'll just go back into this. Well, he goes back into it, doesn't read the terms and conditions, just kind of like goes into it again. And then all of a sudden he's starting to realize that, like, once he gets back into the app, that like the first thing that it asks him to do is like kidnap a person, and he's like, what? Like at first it's like he like at one point was supposed to get like nice looking clothes. Well, the nice looking clothes he had to like run out of the store of and steal and then like drive away. That was like the one bad thing that he did. And like the app like kind of started to make him do like one bad thing after the other. But once he like goes back into the app, um, all of a sudden like the first thing that the app wants him to do is kidnap somebody. And then he starts to realize like all the people on the app that at first had like confessionals and stuff, and like they're like, yeah, like my life is great, it all worked out for me. All of a sudden you're seeing videos of them now currently, and they're like spouting all this like crazy nonsense or this and that, and it seems like this app is getting more and more people by the day is long. And like you're starting to find out some of the people that he had kind of randomly met are on this I Lived app. So it's just kind of like, well, did the app tell them to do that? Or like, I'm so confused. So it ends up that this guy ends up like, I don't want to kidnap anybody, but the app told me to kidnap a person. And it seems like whenever I do something, it like it rewards me some bizarre reason. So he ends up kidnapping somebody, but it's a fake thing. Like the video got rejected, and it's like you actually really have to kidnap somebody. Because ultimately it actually shows that this girl that he kidnapped was just some actor that he paid. And so ultimately we have this old lady that is consistently just banging at his door all the live long, and just because of course she wants his rent. And he's like, you know what, I get it, like I get like you want your rent, but like of course he like rarely ever has it. Or like banging at his door at all hours like doesn't like isn't gonna help anything. um like even while this guy is trying to do a video, like she's banging at his door for the 80 time. Like it seems like she's just living by his door, just rent, just all day, every day. To the point where this guy cannot live without this woman asking for rent. Like, why not just evict him then? Why not just like evict him, or ultimately just like just get to the point where it's just like, dude, I shouldn't have to, like, I'll just send you a text or whatever. If you don't respond, then I'm just gonna start to evict you, because like I don't want to have to like come knocking at your door all the time. Why go and waste all this energy knocking at this guy's door for rent? Like, just evict the guy. Just do it. So ultimately, so this woman comes knocking at his door while he's doing a video, and then he just opens the door and he's like, what do you want? Like, what? She's like, well, rent. And he's just like, you know what, you're already evicting me. Like, what is the point of like me like giving you rent now if you're already going to evict me? Because again, it seems like everything is still not quite going exactly the right way. So because this is still at a time where this guy had not quite gone into I Lived and done everything that it wanted to do, so his life is still kind of falling apart. So what he ends up just doing is he ends up just kidnapping this old lady that is basically consistently coming to his door and consistently asking for rent all the time. So he just kidnaps her and puts her in some shed. As soon as he does that, all of a sudden his old girlfriend is just like, you know what, like, hey, I've been thinking about you lately, and like maybe we should give this another go. Like, maybe I had made some like stupid decisions before. Because ultimately, once he did a video telling her that what she had done on some YouTube video, I think she went to his home and scratched like a hole on his car, like asshole on his car, and he's like, God, really? Like, it's like, I'm being honest, like you cheated on me. And so ultimately she comes to him and ultimately like tells him like, hey, like I think we can reconsider this. I think we can like give this another go. Like, and he's like, why? So you can go into the nether arms of a man? Like we've already known that you're like a cheater, and like why would I go back into this? Like some old flame that he had, not Greta, not Greta. That's the main his main love interest that it seems like he can't get enough of. So it seems like he throws this girl aside, and then eventually come knocking at the door. He's like, "Oh my God, this girl is back again." No, it's Greta, and she's like, "You know what? Like like as soon as as soon as he kidnaps this girl, all this stuff starts magically happening for him." And the girl is like, "You know what? Like I was so wrong, and like I think you're the only right person for me, and this and that." It's like, dude, technically, like this guy is gonna keep on this pattern of meeting these girls that end up just cheating on him, and he's just gonna be so disappointed about him that it's like. So ultimately, he just takes a Greta back when looking at it, it's just like, yeah, this girl is never gonna like exactly treat me right, and she's gonna realize that she can just cheat on me and do whatever she wants and get away with it. So, but he takes her back because ultimately he's just going to be in this pattern where girls aren't going to exactly treat him right, and that's just going to be his. Like every single time, he's just going to go and have girls that cheat on him. So ultimately, he takes this Greta back, and basically, it ends up just like all these things bizarrely that weren't working out for him. As soon as he went into this I Lived app, things start working out. But like everything starts going back to work out again, and then he ultimately like when people tell him it's like, oh yeah, this is working out, he already tells them that it's going to working out. It's like, how did you know? And it's like, because I just know now. Well, he realized when he kind of turns the app around that the thing that says I lived is called Devil Eye. He's like, oh my God, I didn't realize that. Like just turning and flipping the thing around says Devil Eye. Wow. Like, and then all of a sudden he starts reading the terms of conditions, and he's just like, yeah, this is really this is really not what I thought it was going to be. And ultimately, like he is still having this hostage. Eventually he has to like torture this hostage, and he has to do it via a camera. Like he has cameras supposedly all over his home. It seems like somebody keeps trying to break into his home consistently. And then all the while he does all of these I Lived videos. Like he starts going through all the old like I Lived videos, and he starts to notice that there is a guy that is consistently in every single one of these I Lived videos in the background, bizarrely. And so he ultimately is getting more and more pushed with this app to do things. So ultimately things that he would not want to do. And so it ends up being that he starts doing these, and then everything is turning out roses. But then again, he ultimately is just like, man, there's something about this app. So he ultimately goes and tries to find an address of this app, and then he goes to this location, and it's not like seemingly a real building, and the building has the numbers 999 on it, and I jokingly was just like, 666, I get your plan there. So we ultimately have these people that grab this guy and put a like hood over his face, because basically this whole I lived thing has turned into very much of like a big huge thing where everything seems to be much more organized than this guy could have really thought. And it gets to the point where this guy that it owns this company is kind of walking him through things and telling him it's like hey, like I basically own you now. It's like you've already kidnapped somebody, which has been recorded online lived. Like you've tortured this person, which was online lived. It's like if you don't do every single thing now that the app says, it's like we have all this stuff to turn into the authorities to use against you and this and that. Like reasonably, like you're effed. So this guy keeps doing what the app tells him to do, no matter what. Um, like he wants to help out his mother to basically like absolve his mother of all her hardships, and so because he keeps having nightmares about his either his mother or this I lived thing, and supposedly he like asked it to take away his mother's pain. And so the app tells him it's like, well, like if you want to take away her pain, you have to create pain to someone else, to the point to where he ends up having to torture this person that he had already kidnapped. It gets to the point to where ultimately, like he ends up having to keep doing bad things, but everything is just crazily all working out for him. But he's consistently having nightmares. So it gets to the point where he has to do everything that the app tells him to do. It gets to the point to where he ultimately realizes that every single person that he probably just stumbles on through a day-to-day basis is on the thing I lived. And it gets to the point where like he realizes that like some people that he probably fell in love with, or that he probably did this and this and this and that with, ultimately were probably tied to this app. So ultimately it gets down to the point to where like this girl that our main character is with ends up having another girl like come into their relationship for this guy to have sex with while this girl watches. So it's kind of really bleeding to the fact of where this girl like eventually just like probably wants to like already just kind of spice up their relationship or do something more with than just be with him completely and this and that, and they're happy and whatever. It seems like this girl is much more just really interested in just experimenting and this and that. So it gets to the point where like they have this like crazy like threesome or whatever, or they have sex and it's crazy and whatever. And it really gets to the point where I'm just like, man, like this movie is so intriguing and so like I hope that there's like I hope that there is some real turning point or there's a really good ending to this movie. And it gets to the point where it seems like this guy had just lost his soul at some point, where it's just like, well, my soul is forfeit. Like, if anything, like, I'm just turning into this much more angry guy the longer I do this app. And, like, it gets to the point where this guy just kind of just is going to nightclubs, drinking, and kind of living his life away. He's kind of like being this cool personality on this platform that's paying him X amount of money, and um, like we eventually realized that this guy eventually had to kill the person that he had kidnapped because otherwise he would have been found out. It gets to the point where this guy just realizes that there's no way out of this. Like he had already sold his soul to the quote unquote app devil. So and nothing is gonna quite turn out the way he wants it to. Seems like he probably gave up being with this girl. It seems like it's just like him and him alone in this existence. So in the very beginning of the movie, we have it to where there's some string leading to us finding that there's some burnt building or some burnt building that this character is in, some string otherwise tied to some like contraption with two barrels. We end up finding out at the very end of this movie that reasonably what had happened as this guy had placed this shotgun and put a string to said shotgun. And reasonably, we're thinking, like, okay, this can't be the very end of the movie, even though there's only a certain amount of time left. There's got to be this, like, turning point to where this guy otherwise, like, goes, aha. Like, you would think this guy with all this, like, tech and all this, like, writing and all this, like, scripted, like, thing, you would think this guy would have, like, smarted up and figured out how to beat this thing. And you would have thought like this portion would be the time where he's just like, no, like I'm going to keep going and doing this and I'm going to figure it out and I'm just going to like aha this thing and win and beat it and whatever. But no, instead this guy knows he's going to go to hell by the end of this, so he just pulls the trigger and dies. And I'm just like, this is how the movie ends? Like, like we could have probably expected this is kind of how the movie ends, because the opening like scene of this movie kind of tells you exactly where this movie is going to quite possibly end, but it's not 100% seemingly clear. But like, man, that is really just kind of really depressing and or sad that like this ends at a horrible point. You would think that this guy would have just kind of come up with some kind of smart like way of working around this, or you thought he would have came up with some kind of workaround or something like that. Like I know a lot of horror movies or something like that, they want to give you like these endings where it's like, oh no, it doesn't work out and everybody just dies, or they're like the app is just like so like overpowering now that like there's no way to escape it and everyone is going to die or everything is going to go bad for everybody. But I was just like, man, I really wish that there could have been at least some kind of like upside to the very end of this movie, to where it kind of like, even if it goes to a bad ending, like at least we kind of felt good about the way that this movie ends. Like it kind of felt like they kind of didn't know how to end this movie, or like the way they just kind of ended it. Like it felt like towards the very end of this movie, it was kind of like, man, I didn't really like how like they like the character just kind of really just 100% just gave up and gave in, and like the last scenes kind of feel very out of place to the rest of the movie. And like it just like that's the way it just ends. I'm like, that really just sucked. Like ultimately you could have had some kind of just like bizarrish way out of this. Like if really there is some kind of like app devil, maybe there is also some like god app that is kind of like uh that is also just kind of like working its way through this and this and that. Like you would think there'd be some kind of like I don't know, it would be like some kind of like redemption story or something like that. That is like, yeah, what you were doing, it's like you got tempted and you didn't realize it was what it was till it was too late. Like funny, they kept having scenes showing like the God of War game, or they kept showing like scenes of like talking about like, hey, yeah, you got suckered, you got tempted, like you were like Adam and Eve that got tempted by the forbidden fruit, and kind of like that's what happened to you. And like the guy like didn't realize it until it was too late what had happened. Like you would think that this guy like you would have thought that this guy would have had an opportunity to change and redeem himself, um because like he made a mistake. He clearly made a mistake, and he didn't think that his life was going to be in the balance because of a simple mistake, not thinking about it. And um, and you would think that he would have had some kind of time to redeem himself, or ultimately, even if he would have completely 100% just gave in to all this, you would have thought that they would have just had a better ending at the end of the day. Because the ending to me is just kind of like, I don't like the ending. Like, I think at some point, if I were to have ever watched this more than once, like, I think I would probably just like stop the movie at some point. Just because, like, reasonably, like the way it kind of like ends, like it doesn't really do much for me, or just kind of like I just don't like the way it ends. Like I would want to rewrite the movie at that point. Um, but overall, I thought this movie really impressed me. I don't want to talk about this too much longer, but yeah, I really enjoy this movie. I was just like, wow, this movie is way better than I thought it was gonna be. So I was just kind of really happy to have watched this film, and then just be like, I felt good overall about this movie because it kind of really does, like overall, just kind of like I felt like I could see myself in this movie, because but then again, I was hoping for there to be some kind of like I was hoping for there not to be just this like 100% like give up ending. That's what sucked about it. I was just kind of like this guy doesn't even put up a fight. He just kind of easily gives in at the end, and then he just gives up. Um like that really just like that really sucked. That really sucked for me. I was like, like it's like that was such a disappointing ending, but I loved the for most of this journey where this story all went. Um, but I also think that this guy was living far too long in a life that never really worked out for him. Um, and so in desperation, he was just like, God, I just want, like, give me something to just freaking work out. And then once something finally worked out for him, he was just like, oh my God, I am gonna, like, have this thing work out until it just, oh, the one final thing that finally worked out for me, and then like all of a sudden one thing worked out, another thing worked out, one thing, and it's like, oh my God, this is the greatest part of my life. And then once he sees that all being taken away from him, it's just like, okay, here we are again, just back to this like crappy life, that I feel like I'm never gonna get out of. And and but then he was just like, well, F it, like if I don't give into this, like my life is like I'm gonna live an entire life of just unhappiness. So he's just kind of forced into this app to just try to get something out of it, because ultimately it's just like, well, at that point, like I've made too many mistakes now. I've ultimately just kind of like it gets to the point where the guy is just like it's either I live a life of defeat, or I live a life where it's just like I'm ultimately going, like, yeah, there's a lot in here that I really did ultimately come out of really just enjoying, and I ultimately just for the most point, with that whole like beginning scene and the way it ends. Like I wish those could have been changed, but it is what it is. So I'm gonna get out of here because I've been talking for an hour and almost 40 minutes, almost 2 hours, and probably no one will come into this for that long to watch both of these reviews. So I'm gonna get out of here. Bye everybody. Bye everybody.